you ever have like a really stupid idea? You know, like I should do a top 10 manga volumes list. That'll be easy, right? Right? Spoiler alert, it wasn't. No, but seriously, I was putting together, I like to do like a top 10 books I read this year, and I was putting together my list of top 10 books I read. I was looking at the list of books that I read, which was totaling in the high 40s. It's the year's not over. I might read more yet. Give me time. But I got to thinking about it, and I thought, God damn, not only have I read 40-something books, but I've also read like 50-something volumes of manga. I don't know the exact number. I want to say 51. But that's if you consider Uzumaki as one volume, and that's a beast of a book. But anyway, I got to thinking about it. I thought, oh, well, I've read enough manga that I could probably do a top 10 manga volumes list. This is a fantastic idea. No, it's not. Long story short, this turned out to be a lot harder than I ever expected it to be. But now I'm already down the rabbit hole, and I've spent way too much time thinking about this, so we're going to get right on into it. But first things first, as always, I do want to thank my patrons. Thank you, everybody. Also, this is going to be a hopefully content-heavy week. If all goes well, I'm going to have 3 videos because I want my top 10 manga, my top 10 books, and I really want to get that I really want to get the next Dorohedoro read-through up, hopefully by Christmas. But those are by far the most labor-intensive videos that I do, any manga read-through. I also have my family Christmas party, my Christmas, and my fiance's Christmas. We got a lot going on this week. So I'm going to try really, really hard. And I'm going to try to make it work because I failed miserably last week. I really wasn't feeling well. And I just dropped the ball on content. So coming back strong with top 10 manga volumes ever made. Period. This is not, there is no disputing my list. This is the definitive list. Coming from somebody who just started reading manga like 6 months ago. Don't come at me with your I've been reading manga for 40 years bullshit. No, it's not acceptable. My list is the list. Do you hear me? Anyway, thank you all for being here. Let's get started. Coming in at number 10, Berserk, Volume 16. And the key word here is volume, so I really did make an effort to find good volumes. Just having a good chapter or 2 in there didn't really count. It had to actually be a good volume, which actually in hindsight was probably a mistake. This list would have probably been easier if I would have just picked the top 10 chapters, but having to find actual volumes, like I would have my favorite chapter ever, and it would fall in a volume, and I go, well, that's holding the whole volume up. Anyway, let's just get to the list. Berserk, Volume 16. And this is the end of the Lost Children arc. This one came in dead last because it's not actually a great volume, but it had to go on the list because it hit me so hard. I thought the Lost Children arc was fine. I said that people told me that it felt like filler, or it was filler. And I went into it and I thought, yeah, this definitely feels like filler. And then I had this big revelation at the end that it wasn't filler. And it really hit me hard when I realized that I just read an entire arc of Berserk where Guts wasn't the main character. He was a supporting character in someone else's story, and it didn't dawn on me until Volume 16. So just in light of how much I loved that, I don't know, I just liked that one. That was a good volume. Moving on to number 9. Which one is that? These are all jumbled up. There is no rhyme. There's not much method to my madness. I don't know if you could see. Oh, don't look. Jesus Christ, you'll know what's number 1. Coming in at number 9, and no, these are not all Berserk, by the way, just so you know. But coming in at number 9, Berserk, Volume 21, which is the end of the Conviction arc. And this one very well, quite possibly, could have come higher on the list because once again, we have to have an entire volume that's good. And the entire volume has to just be a banger. And this one has to have points deducted because it starts off with the boss fight, with the big, I don't know what that guy's name is, just the epitome of poor character design. That final boss transformation, what an epic fail that was. Worst creature design in all of Berserk. I'll fight you about it. But yeah, it was so bad. Anyway, points deducted for that. You can't be higher than 9 on the list because of bad creature design. Anyway, but in all seriousness, that moved on to actually one of my favorite climaxes for the entire, I don't know, series so far for me. I have read up to volume 33, so keep that in mind. But just the imagery of Guts on top of the wall with everybody behind him, and they're all going to go forward, and that's just survive the night. Oh my God. It was so good. It hit so hard. We cannot ignore the fact that it then goes on to culminate in the rebirth of Griffith. It was just the imagery, top to bottom, front to back, so good. Such a good volume. I don't know what else to say. Moving on. Number 8, Dorohedoro Volume 2. Now, this is kind of a placeholder for every volume of Dorohedoro ever, because they're all really good. I needed something Dorohedoro to go in here because I really wanted it on the list. It's really, really good. It's not good enough to go much higher on the list than this. That's not to say it's bad. It's great, but some of these beats that I'm going to get to later on, especially in Berserk, there's just no way that Dorohedoro's coming up ahead of that on a list. I'm sorry. But I needed it on here, and I thought, well, I'll get Dorohedoro in here once. And I went with Dorohedoro Volume 2 because it's got my favorite joke out of the whole series. And if the series is there to be just a kind of ridiculous slice-of-life comedy and just be a whole lot of fun to read, well then if I'm going to pick a volume to go on here, it's going to have my favorite joke of all of Dorohedoro. Number 7, Berserk Volume number 33. Now, the reason for this one should probably be pretty self-explanatory. Volume 33 of Berserk is the volume where the Demon King goes inside of the demon womb and is reborn into the demon god Shiva. It is magnificent. It is insane. It is just awe-inspiring to look at. But even more important than that is we get Roderick, the sailing prince of Ith. And if this isn't magnificent, I don't know what is. So, yeah, take a back seat, Shiva. Roderick is in the house. And then coming in at number 6, Blam Master Edition 1. I know that the actual volumes of Blam are a little bit funny, but I don't have those. I don't really know the breakdown of those, so we have the Master Editions. I just about fell over. So that's what we're going with as a volume. But Blam Master Edition Volume 1, it hits so different. It doesn't hit like Berserk. It hits different. It reads different. I had to stop. I had to readjust my brain just to do it. It doesn't have some of the emotional beats or the character beats or some of the things that makes Berserk so great, but it has a whole nother thing that Berserk just doesn't. They're different monsters. And I didn't quite understand what a book could do with pictures alone. As wonderful as the art is in Berserk, it doesn't do what the art in Blam does. And that's not to say one or the other is better art-wise. They're just different. But I was taken more by surprise than Blam than I was by Berserk, just because of the absence of words and the feeling conveyed. And Blam Master Edition 1, even though all of the volumes consistently pretty much held the same consistency, and any other volume, volume 2, 3, 4, or 5, could be plugged into this exact spot. So instead of just jumbling up my list with a bunch of Blam volumes, 1 it is. And 1 is fitting because it was that introduction. It was the one that made me stop and go, God damn, this is good. So, first half of the list is over. Top 5 time, baby. Number 5 being Uzumaki. And I don't know if there were technically multiple volumes in Uzumaki. I have no idea. But I'm considering it one volume just because I'm cheating. Yeah, and it had to be in the top 5. Let's be honest. Some of the chapters, not so great. Some of the chapters I thought were silly. But the story brings it back around. And the story brings it back to the point where it hits. And it hits so much harder than anything I had built up in my mind, anything that I expected, anything that I thought that story was going to be able to pull off after about the mid-book slump. See, okay, so it started great, like just full throttle amazing, and then there's this whole mid-book slump to it, but the ending and the way it brings it home and the way it ties it together, even the chapters from the slump that I thought were silly, came back to haunt me in the end, making some of the deepest, darkest, most hollow and empty feelings that I felt reading that manga, and they were all built one brick right on top of the other. And without all those bricks coming together, it would not have been near as effective or as affecting as it was in the end. And it was beautiful. Or hideous. You decide. Either way, it was wonderful, and it absolutely deserves to be number 5 on my list of greatest manga volumes of all time that I read this year. All right, moving right along to number 4. Berserk, Volume 13. Okay, Berserk, Volume 13. Let's start with the Eclipse. This is the end of the Eclipse. This is where everybody fucking dies. Like, all of them. They're just slaughtered and wiped out. This is the scene with Griffith and Casca. And that part of the volume, the end of the Eclipse, would have been good enough to get this volume on this list. And it would have probably put it somewhere, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 area. Like, of the greatest volumes that I read this year. The Eclipse is easily the most affecting thing in all of Berserk. It is easily the most crucial point in Guts's backstory as to who he is and as to why he is who he is. Is that true? Because his childhood really plays a big part in it too. It's one of the most defining moments in his story. But even still, for me, it was fine. It was, like I said, it would have been enough to get on this list, but it would not have tipped the top 5. What took that volume and just tipped it right over into top 5 quality, why it absolutely must be in the top 5? The sprint. That chapter, I mean, it's in the running for one of the greatest Berserk chapters of all time. And I haven't even read past volume 33 yet. And I can tell you right now, if the sprint isn't on your list of top 10 greatest chapters of Berserk, you're not doing it right. The chapter was so good. Anyway, yeah, I would say this volume, easily top 10 material, but that one chapter just drags this thing all the way to the top of the list. It didn't make it to the top 3, but there's some good coming too. Top 3, baby! Number 3. Berserk, Volume 12. This is the beginning of the Eclipse, but this is better. I would argue that this is the better volume. This is why it went ahead of Volume 13 in the list. This one starts with, what was it? The Wind? Oh no. The Wind chapter. Requiem of the Wind. Only the wind announced the end of the fight. Put that shit on your wall. Okay, so it starts with the Requiem of the Wind, gets all the way through Griffith stealing the cart, Griffith calling the God Hand. Also, might I add, that this is the volume that solidifies just how great Judo is. Just how much Judo is the greatest character ever to grace the pages of Berserk. I'll die on that hill too. It's where he has his speech about guts. Just take Casca and go off by yourselves. I'll take who's left, and we'll be a band of merry thieves, I think it is. I forget. But it was just, you will fall, if you don't fall in love with Judo, by the end of that speech, there's something wrong with you. Anyway, so you get the Requiem of the Wind, then you get Judo, and then it all falls apart. You get Griffith calling the God Hand. You get the beginning of the eclipse, and the volume ends. I mean, it's not the end, but it pretty much ends on Griffith sacrificing his friends for his dreams and his ambition, or whatever you want to call it. That asshole. But, oh, God. Yeah, it's good. It's a good volume. And number 2, and I feel like I might get some pushback from this, but I can't help it. It is Blam, Master Edition 6. It has to go number 2. I almost made it number 1. And that is because Blam is so good. I gave every single one of those volumes a 9. They are that good. I can't stress enough how good Blam is. And then, the end of Blam, I had so many hopes, very, very high hopes for Blam, and for how it would end, and how they were going to wrap all that up, and how they were going to make all that work, and it met or exceeded every single expectation that I had. Like, it blew my mind. It is rare. I have some of my favorite books of all time didn't stick the landing, but it was, if you've read 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 pages and you've just drooled over every page and then it kind of fumbled its way out of the gate, that's not a deal breaker for me. But when you have that amazing story and you stick the landing, it's that much better. When you have an amazing story and you stick the landing and exceed my expectations, you make it to number 2 on the list, baby. And maybe number 1, it might have deserved the number 1 spot. But I kind of couldn't help myself. I cheated once again. And I think I'm going to go out on a limb here. And I'm going to say that Blam Master Edition 6 is actually a better volume than the one I picked for number 1. But I have such a soft spot. I'm so weak to this next number that I kind of couldn't help myself. But before we get to that number 1 spot, we've got a few honorable mentions real quick. Big surprise, they're all Berserk. Berserk, Volume 25, The Town Flood. I loved that chapter. I raved about it here when I made it through it on that particular read-through video. Just the town with Shirka calling down the waters or whatever, and you go through like 10 pages of just storms and floods, and oh my God, the artwork is just phenomenal. I couldn't just, Anyway, yes, so the Town Flood, honorable mention. Berserk Volume 26 and 27, because it's the Berserker armor. And the Berserker armor itself, had it fallen squarely into a volume, it probably would have made it onto this list. But it was cut like straight in half. Half of the Berserker transformation goes into Volume 26, and the other half of the Berserker transformation goes into Volume 27. And due to that split and those other volumes just not being great enough to be on this list, the Berserker first half of the transformation and the Berserker second half of the transformation, neither were just strong enough to pull either one of those volumes up onto the list of top 10. But it's more than enough to earn it a spot on the honorable mentions. And last but not least is Berserk Volume 24. And Berserk Volume 24 is the one where we introduce the ideas of witches, the whole idea of magic. We meet the little house, we get the little golem fight, we see the old witch, the young witch, and we get all the descriptions of the magic systems that are in place in this world. I loved it. I couldn't have been happier with the implementation of magic in this world. It was just great. Berserk Volume 24, honorable mention. Now, real quick before we get to number one, I want to know two things from you. Pause the video, go down to the comments section and tell me, what is your number one manga volume of all time? And two, I want predictions. What do you think my manga volume number one is going to be? Yeah, try to guess before you get to it. Anyway, number one, Berserk Volume 7. And it's so typical, it's probably not even a big shocker. If you watched any of my Berserk videos, you probably already knew this was coming. It's the Campfire of Dreams. It is that. That is the reason it's number one. I love that chapter more than any other chapter in all of Berserk. It is my favorite. I don't know if that makes it the best, but for me, I enjoyed it more than any of the others. And let's not ignore the fact that this also starts with Berserk, with Guts and Casca down in the well, or down in the river, and her recounting Griffith's story, and then them going up against the 100-man fight with Guts leaning up against that tree. That panel, I mean, this has some of the heaviest hitting moments of that section of the story. Maybe the whole story, and it ends with the Campfire of Dreams. Give me a break. This is number one. And like I said, Blam might actually deserve that spot more just because of what it was as an accomplishment. But God, I got to give number one to Berserk number 7. Yeah, go ahead and give me your list down in the comments below. But most importantly, I want to know the number one spot. It can be literally anything. Thank you, everybody, so very much for watching. And I'll see you all next time.